Right, welcome to this video where I'm going to talk about chapter 10 of IGCSE economics. And in this video, we're going to talk about price changes. So price changes. We've already looked at demand and supply. And just a quick reminder, demand is, the ability and willingness of consumers to buy. And I just want to say that consumers want low prices. So consumers want low prices and they want high quality. So they want low prices and and high quality. And we also talked about supply, and we noticed that suppliers are happy when prices are high, so high prices. So this is kind of a balance, kind of opposing forces where consumers want low prices and suppliers want high prices. And we talked about price determination in the previous chapter, chapter 9, and we realized that consumers and suppliers can agree on a certain price, which is called a market clearing price or the equilibrium price. And this price is when consumers will be willing to buy and suppliers will be willing to supply at a compromise price, and therefore everything can be bought. But now we also talked about excess demand, where if the price is too low, there's going to be a shortage. And we talked about excess supply, where if the price is too high, suppliers are going to bring more into the market. Now let's think about what can change the equilibrium price, and one of them that we're going to start with is the effect of changes in demand. So in case there's an increase or a decrease in demand, what can change this? So initially, if there is an increase in demand, what's going to be created is a shortage, and the price is going to rise, and the high price is going to encourage an extension in supply until we find a higher equilibrium price and quantity. I'm going to show you that in a diagram right here. So I'm going to start by drawing the vertical axis and the horizontal axis. The vertical axis I'm going to call price, and the horizontal axis I'm going to call Q. And let's say this is our original demand curve. So let's call this D. Let's call it D0. And this is our supply curve, so let's call that S. And let's call this the equilibrium quantity, not very straight, but you will get the point. And let's call this here the equilibrium price. So let's call that P1 and Q1. Right, now an increase in demand is going to shift the demand curve to this point here. So we're going to have a new demand curve, totally new demand curve. Let's call that D1. And we're going to move from this equilibrium, let's call that equilibrium 1, to another equilibrium here. Let's call that equilibrium 2. At this new equilibrium, because of an increase in demand, let's say because of an increase in consumers' income, we're going to have a new price, which is going to be a higher price. So let's call that P2. And you're going to have an increase in quantity, so basically quantity is going to increase and price is going to increase. And that would be shift of the demand curve to the right, and which is an extension in the supply curve. So this is the extension and the shift in the demand curve. The extension is right on this line, and the shift of the demand curve is from that to that, and that's going to cause a new equilibrium at that point. The same is going to happen, the opposite is going to happen if there's a decrease in supply, and I'm going to show you that again here in another different graph. I'm going to call this line here quantity. As I said in the previous video, you can write the whole word quantity, or you can just write Q, and you can write price, or just P. I'm going to understand. If I am your teacher, I'm going to know what you're talking about. So let's say that is the demand curve. Let's call that demand curve 1. And this is your supply curve. Again, a decrease in demand, let's say due to a decrease in consumers' income, is going to shift the demand curve to the left. First, let me just identify that this is the equilibrium quantity and this is the equilibrium price. So let me call that P1 and Q1. So a decrease in consumers' income, for example, is going to shift the demand curve down here. Let's call that D2. And so the demand curve is going to shift leftward, and you're going to move from this equilibrium to a new equilibrium. Let's call that E2. So E2 there. And the quantity is going to decrease and the price is going to decrease. So price is going to decrease to P2, quantity is going to decrease to Q2, and you're going to have this kind of direction. So quantity is going down, price is going down because of a decrease in demand, and we have a new equilibrium right there. All right, let's see what happens when there's a change in supply. Of course, a change in supply in the beginning is going to create a surplus, which is going to drive down the prices, but eventually we're going to have a new equilibrium price, which is going to be lower. Let's try to find that. Let's say there's an increase in supply because of a reduction in costs of production. So let's see what happens. This time it's going to be the supply curve shifting. So I'm going to start again with the demand curve. So let me call that D, and I'm going to call this P, and here Q. So this line is the price and quantity, and let's say this is our supply curve. So this is the supply curve you're starting with. I'm going to just have another S1 here just in case, and this is your Q1, and this is your price. So in case there is a decrease in cost of production, the supply curve is going to shift rightward. So this shows an increase in supply, so it's going to shift rightward, and you're going to have a new equilibrium at this point, and that price there, so let's call that P2 and Q2, and this will be equilibrium 1 and equilibrium 2. So in case of an increase in supply, we expect that there's going to be lower prices and higher quantity, which is a good thing for consumers. This is exactly what consumers want. So quantity is going to increase, but prices are going to go down. And the opposite is going to happen if there's a decrease in supply. So for example, in case the government introduces a certain tax that affects costs of production, therefore making production expensive, again the supply curve is going to shift now, this time to the left. So let's call this S1, and let's have this as the quantity 1, and let's have this as the price 1. So the supply curve is going to shift to the left in that direction, and you're going to move from this equilibrium to a new equilibrium here on S2, and this time we're going to have less quantity being produced or being supplied, and at a higher price. So that's what we're expecting to happen when how prices can change in a market to find a new equilibrium. So we began by talking about an increase in demand here, showing a shift to the right of the demand curve, which shows an increase in price and an increase in quantity. And then here it's a decrease in demand. Again, it's a leftward shift of the demand curve, indicating lower prices and less quantity. And here is an increase in supply, indicating lower prices but more quantity. And this one is a decrease in supply, indicating high prices and low quantity, and the supply curve is shifting to the left. Now that can happen, but we can also have a situation where the supply curve is shifting and at the same time the demand curve is shifting. So those have 4 images that can happen where the demand curve is shifting and the supply curve is shifting. So this is called a simultaneous change in demand and supply. So I'm just going to draw those 4 images here for you, and then you are going to think about what can happen. So again, price, quantity, here again, price, quantity, and then another price, quantity, and another price and quantity. So let's begin with the initial demand and supply curve. So this is the supply curve, this is the demand curve, and let's say the demand curve shifts to the right to that point there, and the supply curve, so we started here, so let's call that 1, and the supply curve shifts to the right, so we end up there, so we end up at 2, this point here, from that point. So what has happened here is that the demand curve has shifted to the right. So the demand curve has shifted to the right. The supply curve has shifted to the right, and the demand curve has also shifted to the right. So that's what happened. So what we can notice here is that quantity is going to increase, but price is uncertain. You don't know if the price is going to change or price is going to remain the same, because of this kind of situation where supply increases and demand increases. So we don't know if the price is going to change, but we know the quantity for sure is going to increase. Let's look at another scenario where we have the demand curve again and the supply curve. So this time I'm going to shift the supply curve to the left. So the supply curve is shifting backwards, that direction, and I'm going to shift the demand curve to the right. So let's first of all identify that this is our initial point here. So let's call that point 1, and then we move to this direction. So we go there to this point here, point 2. So what has happened there is that there is an increase in demand and a decrease in supply. So what you notice here is that prices are definitely going to increase. So prices will increase, but quantity, we are not certain if it's going to increase or remain the same, but prices for sure are going to increase. Right, so let's look at another scenario also, where this time we are going to shift. So this is supply, this is demand. So this time I'm going to shift. I'm going to shift the demand curve. I'm going to shift the demand curve downwards. So this is the demand curve. So let's first ascertain that this is our initial point, and I'm going to shift supply. I'm going to shift. So this is our initial point, and I'm going to shift supply to the right. So supply is increasing, but demand is decreasing. So we move. That's not good. So we started there and increased demand, decreased demand, and then increased supply. So we move here. So we move to this point 2 here. So what we notice here is that if the demand curve shifts to the left and supply curve to the right, then we're going to have a lower price, but the quantity, we are not certain. Now, let's think about where there's a decrease in demand and a decrease in supply occurring concurrently. So this is your supply and this is your demand. So this is our point of starting, point 1, and then demand is decreasing. So we go to that point there. So we go to this point, and then supply is also decreasing. So we move to this point here. So that's our point 2 there. All right, so in this instance, we know that the price, we are not sure if the price is going to change, but for sure quantity is going to decrease, as you can see. So you might want to acquaint yourself with these 4 diagrams in case there is a simultaneous change in demand and supply. For example, where demand is increasing and supply is increasing, or where demand is decreasing and supply is decreasing at the same time, or a situation also where one of them is increasing and the other one is decreasing. So those 4 images are very important, and this is going to depend on the strength of the increase in demand or the increase in supply. All right, so these are the key points we've learned. Where there's an increase in demand, it's going to cause prices to increase, which is an exception in supply. Decrease in demand is going to cause lower prices. An increase in supply also lowers prices. A decrease in supply raises prices, and a contraction in demand. So always follow the order of events, shifting one curve first and then the movement along the other curve. So it's very important to look at those 4 diagrams. If you have any questions, please post them in the comment section, and thank you for watching this video. Please don't forget to subscribe and share my videos with your classmates. If you have any questions, please post them in the comment section. See you in the next video.